Hey everyone, welcome to Penny's Mind Files Method, the podcast showing you where the off ramp to the healing highway is when you're stuck on the life sucks road to nowhere. Today we're talking about mind files. Mind files are beliefs. They're stories that we wrote into our memory banks, what I call the filing cabinets of our mind, and they're written from a point of view somewhere in the past. Now, most of the mind files that our minds process references were written when we were little kids, long before we had the capacity to understand anything about anything. So here's how the mind's process works. It works like this. At the end of every experience, and everything you live through ultimately is an experience, right? At the end of every experience, your mind's process creates a story, a narrative, describing what it thinks happened. Now, that's created at the level of comprehension that you had at the time of the experience. Now, some of those stories are going to go into what I call a neutral cabinet, which is mostly just data, useless facts and things. Not always useless, though. And those are mostly forgotten. But the majority of experiences, and you know what? This is really sad because, wow, we human beings just haven't even got past this yet. Most of the stories that we create end up in our fear cabinet because they're not positive experiences. Now, we also have a love cabinet, and lots of people think that the majority of their mind files are housed in that cabinet, but they're not. That's the big illusion. Those mind files are housed in their fear cabinet. And the false belief that they're in their love cabinet gets them into all kinds of hurt and pain, frustration. Okay, so step one of the mind's process is to create a story describing what it thinks just happened. And then it uses that for future reference. Then when our minds process and how does it uses our five senses. So taste, smell, sight, hearing, touch. When it thinks that we're having a similar experience, it digs into that neutral cabinet and it looks for a file describing what it thinks is happening again and puts it in the forefront of our conscious awareness, which causes us to think, oh, yeah, I know what this is. This is familiar. And then that causes your mind's process to decide upon a feeling to attach to the initial story. There's lots of different feelings, but we tend to stay with only a few, and then we use those ones over and over. Anyway, that feeling creates a filter, which then determines which filing cabinet that mind file is going to be housed in. So that's either your fear cabinet or your love cabinet. So the next time that your mind's process thinks you're about to have a similar experience, it digs in again into the fear cabinet or the love cabinet, retrieves that file, puts it in the forefront of your conscious awareness. So you're not seeing what's in front of you right now in the present. You're already looking through the emotional filter, which was attached to that very first story. And all of those things from that first story are now clouding your perception about what's happening right now in the present. 9 times out of 10, the mind's process is going to agree with and reinforce that original story, which then adds more emotional filters to it. Now, when you have a similar experience, the filters you're looking through, they get thicker, and then it becomes harder to really see what's happening. That, in a nutshell, is how your past interferes with your present and how that negatively impacts your present. Okay, so let's look at a real life example. Let's say you're a little kid. You're, I don't know, 3 years old, and you're playing in your room with your sister, your brother, some older sibling. Now, if something happens and you start to argue, your parent, and it could be your mom or your dad, or even, another caregiver, your grandparent or aunt, uncle, whoever, they hear you arguing and they come into the room to see what's going on. That older sibling right away blames you, and without asking for your side of the story, you get punished somehow. Now, the mind file that you created at the end of that experience at 3 might be something like, why am I always punished when I didn't do anything wrong? Now, the next time you're in a room with that same sibling and you start to argue, your mind's process has already retrieved that mind file and put it into your awareness again. Now you're cautious because you don't want to get into trouble again and be punished for something that you didn't do or say. Now that means you've already added a colored filter. Caution. Let's say that's yellow. So immediately after recalling the past, you've added a fear filter. Now this time again, you're arguing with this older sibling. Your parent comes into the room, and before you can even start to defend yourself against what you know is going to be assigned blame, your parent, for whatever their reason is, takes your sibling's side and once again punishes you for the argument. But this time now you add a red filter because you're pissed off. You're angry. Because who wouldn't be angry when you keep getting blamed for something that you didn't do? Maybe you even add to that original story, that narrative that you created about what you think took place that first time, and you embellish it with what you think happened this time. So, why am I always punished when I didn't do anything wrong? Now becomes, this isn't fair. I didn't do anything wrong. It was so and so, but I'm always the one punished. It's kind of the same sentence. It just changed slightly to reflect the repetitive negative experience. But now an expectation has been born. And the expectation is that you're always going to get blamed for something you didn't do when you're with that older sibling. Now imagine you're 10 years old and it's 7 years later. How many times might you have argued with that sibling and then got blamed? I mean, it could be hundreds of times, right? So now at 10 years old, do you even want to be hanging out with that sibling? Probably not, because every time you did, you got in trouble. But that mind file isn't relegated just to that sibling. Okay, so let's take a step backward now. Say you're 5 and now you're in kindergarten and you're playing with somebody at school and you get into an argument. Guess what? Your mind's process has pulled that mind file out of your fear cabinet and placed it in your conscious awareness, putting you on guard because remember, you added a yellow caution filter to that mind file. And now you add another one because you've just remembered it and reinforced it. Because your mind's process just reinforced another reason to be cautious. Now think how many times you were in an argument between that first time when you were 3 and now that you're 5. How many caution filters are there in that file? So then your teacher hears you arguing with your classmate and then you get blamed. The original narrative, why am I always punished when I didn't do anything wrong? Which became the second time, wow, this is not fair. I didn't do anything wrong. It was so and so, but I'm always the one punished, has grown probably in that 2 years. And since that second experience, who knows how many emotional filters are in there. But now it becomes a full-on victim statement that says, I'm always blamed for everything. So the process, right? An experience became a story that turned into an expectation, and now it's a belief. Odds are, to avoid getting in trouble and being blamed for stuff that somebody else did, you probably created a workaround, a pattern of behavior where you played on your own. You didn't make friends, right? You started being wary. You stuck to yourself out of protection. Now, of course, that doesn't work with family because, well, you live with them and there's going to be interactions because Not interacting is going to get you in just as much trouble as arguing did. But what's happened now is that mind file has become a block that will become more solid as the years go on. Now let's jump 10 years in the future. Now say you're 15. And now you're starting to be attracted to other people because, puberty set in. Your hormones and your body sensations are influencing how you think. And the desire to be with someone is now bigger than the desire to protect yourself. So you let down your guard. You invite people into your personal space one by one. And what do you think happens more often than not? Something goes wrong in that relationship. Guess who's blamed? Why? Because you set up an expectation. But anyway, even more narratives are going to be added to that original mind file. Maybe you even create entire new mind files, file them away in your fear cabinet, and more expectations are born. But now also resentments are starting to accumulate because that anger is also growing. So, how is a person with mind files like these supposed to create healthy relationships? What are they supposed to do? Just choose to be happy? Or maybe they're supposed to turn the other cheek, right? Well, there is a way, but if I told you the answer now, you wouldn't even believe me because you just learned the mind's process and how it works. We're going to keep going down the healing highway, but we're going to take it one step at a time. We're not hitting that gas and motoring through all the difficult stops. We're going to take our time, go for like a relaxing Sunday drive down the healing highway. So that's it for today. I hope you learned something that can help you help yourself some way. Remember to hit that thumbs up, which helps other people stuck in this messed up world find their way to the Mind Files method and hopefully the healing highway. And let me know what you think. Like, join the conversation. Leave me a comment. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next time.